Hello, welcome to Cash Manager Training. My name is Linda Smith and I'll be your trainer today. A little bit about myself. I have been working with Brentford for 12 years now, over 12 years. Prior to joining the company, I was an assistant controller and did accounting just like the rest of you all. So I do have a lot of experience in this and know a lot about what's going on. A little housekeeping. I'd like to point out that if you'd like to put the webinar to a full screen, at the top left corner is there's a Zoom button under Options. If you'd like to ask a question, you can just enter it. If you're in the full screen, there's an orange arrow that you can click on the top right corner. That will expand the control panel where you can actually type the question. I'll do my best to answer any questions after each section. I'll at least ask and see if anybody has any. And I think that is it for housekeeping. I will be showing some slides, but they're just to help me talk about what's going on. If you would like copies of it, you can just contact us, lsmith@brettonford.com, and I'd be happy to share them with you. And with that, I would like to show you a little bit about SL 2011. There's a lot of new features that have come along if you're not using it or haven't upgraded to it yet. And I'd just like to point them out if you're not sure. One of the things that I truly love about the newer systems is the fact that there's a favorites, which means anytime you come across a screen or an item that you use a lot versus trying to go to your financial and then, general ledger inquiries or whatever, if you actually find it and then you right click on the screen, you can say add to my favorites. And then when you go home, it's actually here, so you don't have to try to find it every time within the menus. The other thing you can do is you can actually come up with groupings so that you can say, okay, this is my GL work, my AR work, and so on. Again, just to help you ease of finding things. Some other things that I like to point out is that there's help on every screen, but there's also, wherever you see a blue question mark, you can go to Help Topics. All the manuals are here. If you're in the screen and click on it, it will take you straight to that section. At the very bottom of this listing is a schema, and schema is the list of all the tables and the fields within those tables. So sometimes when you're trying to write reports or create a template, you're trying to figure out what is in what field, the schema can be very helpful. If I went into, let's say, financial management, and I'm looking for my GL tran, let's say, that's my GL transactions, it would actually give me a list of all of the accounts and fields within that table that just help me identify what it is I'm looking for. So I just thought that's always helpful to know. I also wanted to point out that at the top of the input screens, you now have the ability to actually, you can do a grid to Excel, which, wanted a better one than that. Oh. If you click the grid to Excel, if I'm here, I can actually click this. It will actually open up my Excel with my list of whatever. So like if you're looking for things, you can easily, it's an easier way than copy paste into it. It'll just do it for you, but it has to be an input screen, and you have to have Excel 2010 installed in order to do it as well. And I'm not going to save that. Another thing you can do is you can even do a quick print of the screen, which is very helpful if versus waiting for maybe the batch edit. You can see print out what's on the screen. Another neat feature is the attachments. Years and years and years they've always had where you can do notes, but now you have the ability to actually do an attachment. You can upload and insert, attach to the item a text file or a PDF or something like that. Let's say if we do cash manager, it might be a notice you got from the bank, or a wire transfer thing, or you're recording a deposit. You can actually upload or link the file to your document or to the batch that you're doing. So if I just attach that, it is actually going ahead and uploading it to be a part of this batch. So it can be various in this world of trying to become paperless. It's a nice ability to be able to upload it. I guess it didn't like it when I tried to attach that, so let's try this. Let's try doing a link instead. All right, well, I guess I'm having problems with my image. It does work, I promise. It may be my settings are not set up correctly for doing it in Cash Manager. You do have to actually go into each screen within administration and get it set up so that it will allow you to do attachments. But it is a nice new feature. Okay, I think that's kind of it for the new things. The other thing they have is like quick query where you can actually look at the tables using the query. If I have time, I may show you that later. I just thought I would mention it. So with that, we're here to talk about Cash Manager. Cash Manager is a very powerful tool, but it has some caveats that you need to understand. For starters, everything in Cash Manager is date-oriented. Everything you do depends on the date. It does not care what period you posted to. It cares what date you did it. So with that in mind, you have it can be integrated with all the different parts of Solomon. You have accounts payable, which will feed checks, void checks. You have accounts receivable, which will be your deposits and NSFs, or sorry, yeah, payment application batches. In payroll, it would be, again, checks and void checks. In shared information, it's your GL account numbers. Currency manager means that it allows it to have multi-company, multi-currency, and the general ledger. With general ledger, you can actually go back and forth. So it'll do journal transactions, can be fed into it, as well as if you do a batch in Cash Manager, it will feed into the general ledger. Also, I forgot to mention that within accounts receivable, you can record a deposit that will feed into accounts receivable, and then you can apply to open invoices. Those are the only two that have the back and forth, GL and AR. The other ones do not. So I just wanted to bring that up, that these are the integrations. And because of all these feeding into the cash, it's literally helping you maintain your cash balances. The nice thing about Cash Manager is that it is immediate. As soon as you post something in the general ledger or batch or whatever, it also feeds to here. So whereas in the general ledger, if you are in a prior period, let's say you're still working on September for some reason, and here we are in October, you can actually in Cash Manager see where your cash stands. Whereas in the general ledger, if you're not in the correct period, it's waiting to be posted, so you may not know where you stand on your cash. So that's a nice feature of Cash Manager. The other thing I wanted to bring up was, as I said, it's very, very, very date sensitive. So if you're posting, and you do anything in any of those places I just talked about, especially general ledger, it will default, normally it defaults to your business day. So if I'm doing something today, the screen normally populates today's date. But if you're trying to record something that you want in Cash Manager for September, you would have to use a September date as well as a period to post. And that's probably the hardest thing for anybody to get past when they want to start using it. And when you really want to be careful before you start using Cash Manager, that everybody is cognizant of the fact that dates are the most important thing. Period is important too, but not with Cash Manager. It really wants the correct date. So once you get that under control, then it's easy to use. So I think that's it for the niceties or the integrations and so on. So I think on that, I'm going to start showing you a little bit about the system. For starters, do not turn on Cash Manager. Do not even set up the screen until you're positive you're ready to use it. Because what happens is when you actually turn on and set up the cash manager that you want to start using it, in accounts payable, it will stop you from being able to keep your checks for reconciliation. So if you're sort of in that transitioning period, you need to make sure that you've cleared your checks, that you're ready to really turn it on before you fill in this screen, the cash setup screen. And what I mean by that is in accounts payable, under the setup screen, it knows that this is your cash account. It also knows under your options whether you're keeping checks to be reconciled or not. Now, you may want to check this first. You may not even have this set up, which some people don't. This would be if you actually use under accounts payable the check reconciliation screen to clear your checks. And also when you're looking under vendor maintenance, you can see whether the checks are cleared or outstanding. If you don't use that option, then this may not even matter to you. So I just wanted to put that out there. So if you're ready and you're sure that everything's great, then you can come in here, and the setup screen is pretty simple. First thing is, how long do you want to retain your balances within periods to retain the balances? I've got 24. You know, when you're doing your average days to clear, that can be in your AP and your AR. How long does it take for a check to clear or a deposit to come? Tells you how many months you want to average. How long do you want to keep your transactions within Cash Manager? Again, they will keep them unless you literally run a delete process, but this is so that if you decide to run it, it has a default to go to. What period am I in right now? This is going to default to usually what the GL is, but you can change it to a different period if you're just starting out and you want to start months prior to, let's say, where the general ledger is, which I do advise. Do not start your Cash Manager exactly the month you want. I typically tell everybody to start at least 1 month prior to when you really want your first bank reconciliation done in the system. It just gives it a nice foundation for to build your very first bank rec, because they're more than likely going to be issues the first time you go to do a reconciliation. It's just what happens, and it's usually because of dates and just not being completely ready. Anyway, your first batch number that usually defaults to 0001. Again, you can start with whatever number you want. Some people like to have unique batch numbers, so they may start it with something different. When do you want to start accepting transactions? That's an important date. That date will allow you to go back. Let's say you have been using AP check recons and your accounts receivable and so on. You can actually start it so that when we run the integrity process, it will go through and look for anything that's outstanding. And it will help populate that very first bank reconciliation you're going to do. So that first date is important as to when do you want to start using the system and what do you want it to pull in. You may have items that are older than that are outstanding, but there are only 1 or 2 of them, which I'll show you how to handle those once we get further into the system. But just wanted to explain that start date is very important because that does tell it how far back to look. Your AR holding account is when you can do a cash batch that is AR related. It's called a PA type. What happens is it will debit cash and it will credit this holding account, send the batch over to accounts receivable, and then it will hold it there until you actually apply it to an invoice or a customer. And when that batch posts, it would take it out of accounts receivable and the holding account. So it's just a place to sit until you actually apply it. So this may become one of those places you want to reconcile at the end of the month to make sure you've done everything you're supposed to do, that you have nothing kind of hanging out there. Okay, then some of the other options we have, it says, do I want to provide the reconcile amount? That just means when I'm trying to see how far I'm off, do I want to see it? Well, of course I want to see how far I'm off, so that's a yes, that's a checkbox. Show the bank recon. the GL bank. So what that means is, do I want to show that my cash manager matches my bank statement as well as the general ledger? Again, most people want it that way because then you're tying across the board. So that is checked. Generate GL detail transactions. That just means when you're posting, do you want to have detail or roll up? As most people, when you're trying to reconcile, it's a lot easier if you have detail than rolled up. And then update cash accounts used in the GL transactions. That means when I do something in the general ledger, do I want it to feed into cash manager? And again, usually you want it to, or you're not going to bounce to the general ledger. So I usually check all of those things as yes. I want to post in detail. I like to see all of my detail in the general ledger. It just makes it easier to tie back. And then how many reconciliations do I want to show in my screen? You know, if you've been using it for years, you may want to change this option. But in the beginning, it's nice to see all of your reconciliations, and I'll show you in that screen what I'm talking about, but all the previous ones that have been done. It just helps you keep track and know how many of them are in the system. So that is Cash Manager setup. And as I said, if you have any questions, here's your little blue help. You can always go in. You can see everything that it's talking about. You can click on it. As with every screen, you always have help. So it's nice to be able to look at the manual from any screen you're in. Okay, so that's the actual setup. So once you have it set up, and as I said, if you're already using the system, your next step would be coming into Cash Manager and saying, okay, what cash accounts do I want to keep track of? And typically, you're going to want to keep track of your cash that you use in accounts payable, maybe an investment account, maybe a payroll account, anything where you want to do a reconciliation, not have to do it in Excel. So in this case, I have 3 different accounts set up within this company. I'm trying to get it so you can see everything. The first one I have is just a standard checking account. My second one is my corporate account. You can put in, you know, the actual bank account number, your transit number, your address, if you really wanted to keep track of which BOA account is it? Is it my ops or whatever? Sometimes, you know, if you're looking at the bank statement, it just makes it easier if you have that information in front of you, that you can match it up if you have a lot of them. It will show you the account, the sub-account. When was the last time I actually did a reconciliation? Is the account active or not? That means, are you actively, you know, are you allowed to, if you have it active, then transactions will flow into it. If it's not active, they just won't come into here. You can actually stop saying, I don't want to use this account anymore. I'm not reconciling it anymore. And last but not least is I consider the very most important thing when you're doing setting up new accounts is the button for accept updates from GL. I've actually had clients that have set up the GL account number, started doing deposits in the GL, and then they said, oh, I have to go turn on Cash Manager. They come in and they either A, forget to do this, or B, posted those journal entries. So then when they go to do their bank recs, they're like, well, why don't I see these journal entries? Well, the problem was the entries were done prior to you saying my cash manager should look for journal entries and should actually show them in here. And when you do a journal entry, so if I go and I look, do an F4 so you can see the screen. If I go and look at this account number and I show a journal entry, if you have Cash Manager turned on and the cash account set up, what you're going to see in the general ledger is that if I go and do a journal entry and I use that account number, so if I come down and I use 1030 zeros, all the way over here, I have a reconciliation status. If I didn't have it set up and I didn't have it accepting, these would be blank, like they are with all all of your other GL account numbers. So if I change it to a different account number, I'm not going to see, I'll get everything so cleared. Versus if it's truly linked, it should expect me to put something in here on my dates and how much money it is. You see when I actually typed in dollar amounts, it is now showing that it's outstanding, which means in the bank Recon, the item is outstanding until you actually clear it, which is something nice. It used to be the opposite, that it always came cleared instead of outstanding. So finally, they fixed that. So that's just something, if it's linked, it gives you the opportunity. But if it's not linked, it doesn't know what to do. So it wouldn't be feeding it down. So you'd have to do some entries in order to bring those items in. But again, I'll get into that a little later. But I just wanted to show you that. So if I get out of journal entries, so that active is important, and the accept, this little button. If you don't have it turned on, the journal entries will not feed, and it will cause you problems. So that's how you set up a cash account. Very simple. You do a save. Now that I've created my accounts, you can actually start using Cash Manager, and as you post things, they'll start feeding into Cash Manager for you to do a reconciliation. You'll start keeping track of it. The next thing I want to show you is, if within Cash Manager, you can actually do your own batches of cash items. So you could do deposits, or you could do, let's say, service charges or transfers of cash. Within the system, it allows you to set up what's called an entry type. Now, these entry types are interesting because they use words for account numbers. So if you always know it's that you're going to have credit card fees, like this very first one, I know that every month I'm going to have a CC. I can set it up that it's credit card. I can put in my GL account number, my sub account, whether it was a disbursement or a receipt. So it just means, money coming out, money going in, whether the account is active. And it says update AR, but truly the only one that updates AR is P8. So that's really not an option. So it's your name, or your two-letter, it could be digits as well, alphanumeric item, and a default account number. Now, the other thing about that default means it will populate the screen, but you can always override it. Let's say you don't want it to go to the sub-account of zeros, and you actually want to post it to a specific thing, you can easily type over it, and I will show you that. So these ones that have disbursements and receipts and account numbers have been added to the system. Other types that come with Cash Manager are called O-type entries. These 4 entries right here, the OA, OD, OM, and OP. These types, O-type entries, are for Cash Manager only. They're for fixing things. They're for entering a beginning balance. They're for fixing a date. Let's say, if you posted something to the wrong date but the right period, you can use an O-type entry to quote-unquote move it. I'm going to show that later on, but O-types, just realize that O-types will not post to the GL. They are for Cash Manager only. So if you pick something, you see outstanding AP and you use it, and then you go, wait a minute, why isn't it in the general ledger? It's because an O will not post to GL. So, but it's very powerful in what it can do, just in that it can help you reconcile, because if your bank Recon does not, if your Cash Manager does not balance to the bank statement, you can't move forward. You are stuck in that bank rec until you figure out how to make it reconcile. So it can be a very powerful thing to use a O-type to make it tie. If you're missing something, or something was posted to the wrong period or the wrong date or whatever, that you can use this O-type to fix Cash Manager and then move forward. And as I said, the PA is powerful because it also updates the AR module. So as I said, you can enter an AR deposit, which will post into the accounts receivable, and I'm going to show you that as well. Okay, so based on that, okay, I showed the integration. I'm just making sure I showed you everything I want to do on these first two. Okay, so I talked about the integrity. Beginning, yes. Okay, so I showed you the trans types. I showed you how to set up an account. The only other thing, I mean, you can use recurring items. That would be if you had something that you paid on a regular basis, or it was the same fee every month, let's say, that always comes in. I mean, you could always set it up that you had a recurring item, and you could process it just like a recurring accounts payable or journal entry, so versus you having to type it in every time. I don't know too many people who use it, but it's easy enough to set up. And the last thing under maintenance items is cash flow. And cash flow is sort of a projections. So you can set up items that you know are coming about in the future. And then you would run a cash flow report that would allow you to incorporate these future items to show you where your balance may be. Most people use Excel to do this, but you can use Cash Manager to do it. It's just, it's very labor intensive in the fact that you have to maintain all of these items, which may or may not be an issue, but I just know that if I always knew that I'd have to set up like a payroll on for every single period, either that I'd have to change the data all the time. Let's say I always knew that monthly I was going to get a large deposit from somebody. You could put that in there. You could do what ifs. So you would maintain them in this cash flow maintenance. Then what you would do is under reports, you can go in and run a projection using that maintenance to allow you to see where you stand. If you know that money, you have to pay out payroll, where I'm going to stand with all of my money. So what this will show you is by GL account number, or I can run a flow, and I want to say, okay, my cash flow is going to be weekly, and it will actually show you a total summary of how much money is expected to go out on a weekly basis from my accounts payable based on what's in there at the moment, and also show me accounts receivable, how much money is supposed to be coming in based on the due date. I can say my case number that I'm including is my PR that I just did. And then if I want to include, if I have purchasing, I can do include any purchase orders that are out there that are due, and any overdue. I like to include overdue because that means I want to include anything that hasn't been paid yet that I might get money. So if I do a begin processing on this cash flow, I'm going to say, here's how much cash I have in each account. This is how much money I have. Then how many cash receipts I'm expecting. I've got a little, some negatives. It doesn't look like I have much coming in the future. Oh, that's each account, so accounts receivable. So I've got some other overdue accounts that people owe me money. But then it'll spread it out over each one. So here I have something, at the end of December that should be coming in. I've also got how much money should be going out in my AP. Again, lump sum of how much money is going out. And then my end result is, what will my dollar amount be? What's my balance? So it can, as I said, it's nice because it takes into consideration everything that's out there in your other modules. So it might be something you want to use, maybe not without those cash flow items. And as you saw, when I went to run the report, it also gave me the ability of running it weekly, daily, weekly, biweekly, semi-monthly, or monthly. I personally like weekly because weekly I want to see where my cash is going. Personal preference. And that was under reports. This is the cash flow projections. Whoops. Didn't put anything in there. All right, so that is under the maintenance screens. We've gone over those items. Are there any questions? Okay, then. I'm going to move forward. So now that I've got my cash account set up, I've got entry types. I want to actually start looking at what can I do within Cash Manager. So if I go down to the input screens, you have cash account transactions, cash account transfers, and then the actual bank reconciliation. I'm going to start with the cash account transactions, which is where you would enter, I call it my miscellaneous items. If your AP is bringing you your checks, you know, your AR is giving you deposits, or you could do deposits feeding back. Typically, this is where you're going to enter items that are not standard, your service charges, your, like I said, your credit card fees maybe. You're going to get your bank statement. You're going to go through and you're going to say, okay, I recorded most of this stuff, but I'm missing a few things. You actually come into this screen to do the entry for those. This particular item, this batch that I have opened here this was a air deposit that we received. My posting period is, you know, of course, the period that I want, but I also be very careful of the date. Date. Reconciliation mode is also very important in a batch. You can either do a batch by the total of the batch, which means the items will post, but in your reconciliation, your bank recon screen, it will only show the total. Or you can do a batch that will show you each line item, and it will post each line item into your bank reconciliation. So it truly depends on what you're doing as to whether you want batch or detail. Let's say you had a lockbox and you have 20 different clients or customers that paid you. You probably want to do a deposit as by batch because it's going to come into the bank statement as a total. Credit cards, same kind of thing. They paid you. So you want to do a lump sum because that's how it came into your system, and you just want to record it the way that the bank statement shows. It just makes it easier for you to reconcile back to the actual statement. But in this case, I'm doing it by detail. Status, of course, is just like all other batches within the or Solomon. You know, do you want to what's my handling? Do I want to post now? Do I want to release later? I'm going to do release now just so I can show how it gets over into accounts receivable. Of course, the batch controls the dollar amount of the batch, in this case, my deposit. What company am I posting to? As I said, it is a multi-company, can do multi-company as well as multi-currency. If you did multi-currency, you'd have to select it here. This is not a multi-currency company. So my company's fine. My bank account is the 1030 that I've been using. My bank sub-account, you can always do an F3 everywhere. You can always do an F3 to pick if you're unsure. So you do my F3. I want that. And then when I get down into the grid, I can pick, and it really depends on, when I do this F3, I'm picking a PA, which means I'm going to post to accounts receivable. This will feed into accounts receivable. If I say, okay, 1190, again, that came from the PA setup. And that's where that holding account is. And then my account, my sub-account. What is my description? I mean, you type in whatever you want. I just put in the customer name, ID. I put in a reference number. It could be your check number. It could be, you know, the customer ID again. But realize whatever reference number you put will also feed over to AR. Now in this case, I'm not, if I knew the customer ID, I could put it in here, but let's say I don't know it. What's going to happen is it's going to feed it to accounts receivable and then allow me to pick who's it's supposed to go to. If I forget, if I skip it or something like that, it will allow me to fix it and put it to the right one. Or I could put in my CT0110, do my F3, and it shows me who the person is, or even an F3 would allow me to pick it. You know, if I knew who it came from, you know, might be able to find it that way. But I want to show you how it goes over without using one. And then, of course, my date, because I'm doing detail. This is very, 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 very important that this date be the date within the period you're doing. So I'm posting to 11. I want this to go to 11. You really, and it will not say, hey, you don't have the date within the time frame. So you've got to be very careful with dates. I'm going to tab over. Now, one thing you may have noticed at this point in time is that it's saying a credit, but I know I'm doing a debit. Well, Cash Manager looks at the type of entry and knows automatically my offset to this is going to be, in this case, a deposit. So I'm debiting cash. So it's asking me, what am I going to credit? A PA is a debit. If I had done a disbursement, then it would say, I want to post this. So if at this point, I want to do a F3, let's say a credit card fee. And you can mix and match. They don't have to be one batch per whatever. And because I'm doing by detail, each one will have its own entry. So if I said OK to this, it defaulted to my account, my sub-account. I could put CC fee 1110. I put fee 1110. When I get over to here, it's asking me what do I want to debit, because it knows a fee is a credit to cash. So it truly depends on what you pick here as to what you're going to enter over here, if I can get it to show. So in this case, if I put a $50 credit, fee, then that would now show up. And the other thing is the reconciling, whether it's outstanding or cleared. I might say that it's cleared because it's a fee, which means I know it already happened. I received something. I see it on the bank statement. So instead of showing it as an outstanding item, I can actually say that it cleared. The other things I may have skipped, the project and the billable, again, when it feeds to GL, then from GL it would go to like project series. Vendor does not feed into, like I said, it does not, none of these things actually feed into those other modules. It doesn't feed into project series, but it would go into the general ledger. You include the employee ID, the labor class, and then cleared. So at this point in time, if I release this batch, right now I said, because I just added another thing to it, I'm actually off because I can have my debits and my credits, but I need to say exactly the dollar amount that is going to affect cash, which is the deposit of the $30,000 less the $50 fee. So I'm going to make this $30,262.27. I'm going to do a release now. I'm going to close the screen. And it's going to post a batch. You see it says batch 138 AR. So if we go over to accounts receivable now, accounts receivable, and I go into payment application, just as if you were doing a regular deposit, and I do an F3, I'm going to see that that batch is on hold. Now the reason it's on hold is it's telling me I didn't enter a customer when I posted that batch. But it will allow me at this point to click on here, do that F3, and I know it was CTO 110 who I wanted to post it to, I can say save, okay. Now at this point in time, I can even apply that $30,000 to this open invoice and post the batch. So it is a nice way of, if you did get it, you do deposits daily and you have a mixed match of all kinds of things, you could even have, a refund of a FedEx with, an employee gave you money and as well as a deposit from a customer. You can do that all in one batch, all in one deposit, and it would feed over to all the different places you need. You would need to, and then you can clear the items. You can clear the batch. So if I go ahead and I put my 30,000, 312.27, which was how much money was paid, I can do a release now. And I've actually fed from Cash Manager into AR. It's just another option, another way of doing things if you wanted to. And I'm going to close that so that it will post. Okay. Other types. So I mentioned O types. Within Cash Manager. So I wanted to show you how you would possibly fix an item. Let's say you just began, you're starting to use, or somebody posted something to the wrong date. It doesn't like it that I didn't fill this in. All right, 1030. I posted something to the wrong date. I posted a deposit to December, but it really should have been November. So the date, because it defaulted in the general ledger to 12/1/1999, but I needed it to be 11/30/1999. I would come into the screen, I would use an OD, and I always do that. Where did I want it to go first? It's just easier for me. And then how do I correct what was wrong? So my OD F3 means it's a deposit. So I'm debiting cash on a certain day, and then I'm going to credit cash because my original was a debit to cash on the wrong day. Do an OD. I don't get an account, a project, a task, a sub-account. None of these will fill in because I said before, they have no effect on the general ledger. So I'm just going to squish them. All I'm trying to do is fix a date. So I'm going to say fix deposit date of 12/1 to 11/30 to 11. Okay, so I'll put DEP 11/30. I want this to be 11/30, so I'm going to leave that OD. I'm debiting OD. Yeah, we know. Oh, because it's at 12. Yes, we're okay. I want this to be an 11 because I'm trying to fix 11. I'm trying to work on my November bank rec. I'm no customer, no vendor. I'm going to squish those as well. My date, as I said, 11/30. If I tab over, I'm going to, because my debit is again assumed at the top, so my credit is going to be 12359. It's outstanding on 11/30. I can do an OM, which is going to take it, credit it. OM is an miscellaneous disbursement. I like to use ODs and OMs for correcting things because that's typically what you're doing, other items. I did an OM, and I'm going to say fix the date again, fix deposit date to 11/30, DEP 11/30, This one I want to be 12/1/1999 because what I'm trying to do is offset the one that was wrong. 12011999. Yes. So all I'm trying to do is move it from one date to the other. This will not feed into general ledger. It will only stay right here. I'm going to save this. I'm going to change it. And because my they're debit and a credit, my batch is 0. And again, I'm only going to see these in Cash Manager. I am not going to see them within the general ledger. I'm going to say release now. And I'm going to close the screen. Okay. So I've posted the batches. I've done some transactions. One other item I'd like to bring up is the fact that in the general ledger, although you may have it set up to post automatically for all financial transactions, they didn't set it up that Cash Manager items will post automatically. It's something that just hasn't been integrated yet, even though so if you're going to do your batches and you've posted all these things and then you're trying to reconcile and you say, why am I off? I posted those items. Look under post transactions because a lot of times it's sitting here because you didn't realize they didn't post. It's just one of those places to look when you're trying to track down why am I off. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and begin processing and say, okay. So now my GL is up to date with my Cash Manager. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Cash Manager. Okay, so that was cash transactions. So as I said, there's a lot of different things you can do in there. The other thing you can do within Cash Manager is, let's say you have a lot of accounts, like a payroll account that only gets funded when you do payroll. So you do a wire transfer for one account to the other. Now, again, you can always do a journal entry or you can use Cash Manager. So I've got a batch in here that I'm just going to do F4 that shows I'm going to do a transfer from my ops account, my corporate account, into my other account. In this case, it's just my cash account that I've been doing items out of. I want to transfer, so I'm going from my company, my source account, so it's usually the from to source, who sent the money, over to account number 1030. Again, F3 works on everything. 1030. What is my reference number? I usually put in like XFR or something like that just so I know that it was a transfer. Of course, you can put in whatever you like. You may want to put in some bank code. There's nothing that stops you, but if you don't put something in, when you go to look at bank reconciliation screen, it does sort on this reference number. So I would also suggest that you start using something so that items will be grouped together, again, to make it easier for reconciliation. And that is actually where we're headed next, so I will show you. But as I said, I like to do XFR just because it does point out to me that it was a transfer. What date did it occur? Again, be precise. You want to make sure that your period matches your date, and your date matches what happened in the bank so that across the board life is happy. You can put a transaction description in as to why you did the transfer, and then, of course, the dollar amount. So in this case, I'm going to say yes, release now, and this will post this batch for me. Excuse me. Okay. All right, so what I've done, I've showed the cash accounts and the cash transfers. Those are really the only input screens you have in Cash Manager. The majority of the time, you're working in Bank Rec. So I'm going to show you the Bank Rec screen. As with all others, you can start with your cash account. You can do an F3 to pick it, and if it's easier, I'm going to show you this one. There's 3 different cash accounts I have to show. Okay, so I've got the account and the sub-account, and then here, this one has never been reconciled. We just started using the account, so I've never done a bank reconciliation. So the first thing you do is, of course, the cutoff date, which is typically the end of the month, but it may not be. You put in the dollar amount, and then you put in what is the statement, what on the bank statement, how much money did I have? I don't have one in front of me, so I'm just going to put in $1 because I might just want to see what's been happening during the month. Let's say it's the middle of the month, and I just want to see what activity has been posted. I could put in $1. I can, up here, I can see what do I want to see. Do I want to see just the items that have never been cleared? Do I want to see the items that have cleared? Or do I want to see both, which means items that have cleared and uncleared? In this case, I usually like to start with both. It just shows me what's going on for beginners. So if I click on both, and then I click down in the grid, I should be able to see my Reconcile Deposits. So it shows me during the month of November, my deposits, these are how many deposits are out there. I've got journal entries, so if I go across, it tells me what batch it was. See how these have no reference number? They just sort of float to the top. You may want it that way, but again, I like to group stuff together if I can. How much money was cleared, how much money was deposited, and then in this case, they were both journal entries, and it shows that, you know, it was back in 7/7 of 1999 that they actually, so that's pretty old. So these items shouldn't be here. That's probably why they say 0. Then I've got these 3 items, which actually have November dates. So I have 2 deposits, 3 deposits, and there's my I did to try to fix that something was done. I can see that they all came from Cash Manager. Here's my 30,000 that I fed over to Accounts Receivable. You can tell that it's a CA, but the type was a PA, so you know it went to Accounts Receivable. If I just say OK, now if I cleared it, if I click this button, it's going to fill in a clear date right over here. I could put in the actual clear date. I usually just let it default to the date of the bank recon. I said OK, and then I say yes, I want to save it. This now updates that I have in transit $50,000, or sorry, yeah, $52,000, and that the items is cleared. If I look at just outstanding now, I'm only going to see those 2 items at the very bottom. So you can see why I kind of like the both versus just cleared or outstanding. But if you're trying to zero things down, this might be, you know, and it works the same way in disbursements. Let's say I want to figure out what this is. I'm like, well, where did you come from? I can actually click on detail, and it will take me to the screen where it occurred. So in this case, I can show that, okay, here's a cash account transfer. It was $40,000. It's actually unposted, which means I'll bet you I'm going to be off on the GL side because this is not posted in the general ledger. So I really do like inquiry screens as well. I'm going to say cancel to that. I don't have any outstanding checks, so I'm just going to save this for a moment. And I'm going to look at the other account, because I know this one has insert. Oops, save. Okay, if I go in, so as I said, with reconciling checks, if I say both, and I click here, and I look at my reconcile, I thought this one had checks. Give me 1 second. I need to create a brand new one. There we go. And if I save this, I've got 1130. I've got a statement balance. I've got what's in transit. If I go into my checks, Reconcile Checks, same thing goes. It looks just like disbursements. I'm just looking at the outstandings. They show that I've got some from Cash Manager, some from AP, shows that they're outstanding. Now, if I hit cancel and I do both and then go back into checks, I can see even things that may have been cleared. Whereas on the other screen, when I looked at it with just outstanding, it didn't show me everything. Now, this can really be helpful when you're trying to tie down checks, let's say, because, if you have a lot of checks that go through your checking account, you may accidentally clear the wrong one. So one of the tricks I use is I highlight the entire grid. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't have the grid to Excel, so you have to do it the old-fashioned way. So highlight the grid. If I do a Control-C, open up my Excel, Control-V, this allows me to see that my check mark comes over as a yes, and then I get a clear date whether they're cleared or not. So I can actually sort on the check number and compare that to my bank rec. You may get your bank rec digitally, from a file that you download from the bank site. You can then just zero in. Okay, here are my checks. What cleared equals what cleared. Does the value equal? Sometimes they clear checks for the wrong amount. So you can easily check. Okay, these are all my yeses or my nos or whatever. You sorted on, did I get all my fees? Did I get all of my, deposits? Did I miss something? It's just an easier way of reconciling when you can spit out the yeses and the nos, the cleared and the not cleared, to help you tie the numbers down. And the other thing I like is, of course, then I can sort on value, I can sort on date, I can sort on anything, whereas unfortunately, in this screen you cannot. What you see is what it is. It usually sorts it by GL first, then CA, then AP. You usually get your, as you can see, it has nothing to do with the check number or the value because SA would come after check numbers. So just a little trick. All right, so after I've figured out what's cleared and not cleared, I'm going to come across, so I've got my, I'm going to each and I'm going through. At that point it says, okay, my adjusted balance. So it's saying if I take my statement and I add in my deposits in transit and I subtract my outstanding checks, I come up with a balance that I would be in the bank if everything had gone through. Then I come over to my cash manager balance. My cash manager says, but I have a different amount of money. So at that point, this is when you have to start investigating and going, okay, did my deposits tie completely? Did my checks all clear completely? Is there something in Cash Manager that may not be in the bank? What's making it off? And if you keep going across the board, the other thing you want to do is you want to confirm that is GL off as well. Now, if they're off the same amount, typically it means something wasn't recorded. So I'm off by $126,000. It means that more than likely a deposit wasn't recorded, or I have more outstanding checks than I should. I didn't clear something. So this is when you start investigating, what's wrong, what's off. Sometimes you have items that were posted to the GL, but they're not in Cash Manager because the date is wrong. And what I mean by that is that 12/1 date. So first thing I do when I'm off like this is I would go investigate the inquiry screens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink this for a moment. First place I would typically go is right here, your daily cash. Now in the daily cash, you can look at each account. So this is at the moment, at this very moment, what is the dollar amount within Cash Manager. So every time you post something, this gets updated. So if I go and look at that, I can look by period, and I can say, okay, I'm looking at the month of November. So if I come down here and I say, okay, but look, I've got a December date or a December period with a November date. Well, that's going to throw me off because, oh my, we got an 11/30 with the 12/19/1999. Cash Manager is going to say, you belong to November. GL says, no, I don't. I belong to December. Same thing, this one, 11/29/1999. Same thing, wrong period. So you may have to fix that one as well. By looking at it, I can, at that point, I see that it's wrong. I can actually go to my details and say, okay, what was it? Somebody cut a check. Okay, so I don't want to do anything with the check, so that might be one of my O's where I said, okay, or I know I'm off because a check was cut, but it's going to be outstanding. So, all right, my GL may be off because it's not posted, but I know it's in Cash Manager because of the date. And I'll show you a report that'll help you with this as well. So there's those that keep going down, 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 down. Whoop, look at this. Here's something from 11/99, and it's posted to July the 15th of 1999. Well, of course, that's going to throw me off because they don't match. I've got two things, actually. So I've got, so these things that you identify, they would have to be fixed, more than likely with O types, to bring your bank recon in balance. All right, so that's one way of identifying them. The other way is you could look at the balances by date. So here you can say, okay, it shows me the date, it sorts in date order, and then again, comparing the two, oh, here's an 11/30 with a 12 and a 12. So again, it shows me this was wrong, so I need to, correct it. So just like that, I'm able to drill into, okay, what happened on this day and what's going on. The other inquiry screen that I use a lot is in the general ledger inquiries. I can do the same thing because sometimes things may have gotten into the general ledger that for some reason didn't get, especially in startup, like I said, where you may have started it but then didn't turn on Cash Manager and then things are missing. So if you come into here, 1030 01 100 AA 411, and oops. You're going to see the same kind of thing. Here are all my dates. Well, there's July. So I would say that whole batch is wrong. But all of that seems good, right? But I know by looking at the other screen, I actually had something in December with a November date. This is going to show me as well. Look. Oh. Okay, so, it just helps you drill down into what could throw it off, but I could say it 1,000 times, your dates are going to be the biggest problem. Okay, so that is sort of a highlight of how you would do, a bank recon. Usually it's going to take some reconciling, some, investigation. And, if everybody is true and does their work correctly, it might be a breeze, and when it's not, just realize that, in order to correct it, you have to kind of do the opposite. Like if it was a deposit, you would have to do an M on the wrong day, OD on the right day. And I think that might be one of the things that's hard to grasp. Just making sure that you do the right O type to make it do what you want. Okay. Any questions? Okay. All right, so I've done input and your processes. Just want to make sure I covered all of the things I wanted. Sorting. Oh, I forgot one. Under reports, when you're doing the bank recon report, or when you're doing bank recons, there's a couple of reports that would be very helpful. One of them is the detailed bank reconciliation report. Now, there have been known issues where you don't have the rights to a certain screen, so if it pops up that says, and it's grayed out, you may need to get that fixed. You may need to be granted rights to a screen. But the way it's supposed to work is if I do a print preview, it's going to ask me what day am I starting with. So I'm doing November, so I'm going to start with the 1st. So click on that drop down. I'm going to click the 1st through the 30th. I'm going to do only 1030, 01, 100, my AA1. If I click OK, what happens on this report is it's going to show me my beginning balance that I put in front of the statement, or ending balance, what is still outstanding in checks as well as in deposits, and then it's going to show me the reconciled amount as well as items that do not match. So here's my outstanding deposits, here's my adjusted balance, how much money I'm off. Okay, then at the very bottom, it's going to tell me things that aren't the way they're supposed to be. And this can be really helpful when you're trying to look for things. So the first part of it tells me I have items that we recorded in Cash Manager that are not in the general ledger. Well, there's that transfer I did. I bet you I forgot to post it. And this is telling me, hey, I'm in Cash Manager, but I'm not in the general ledger. So if I go and look under general ledger, under post transactions, there's that batch. Okay, so I can actually begin processing. So that item is corrected, quick and easy. Okay, then my next item says I have things in the general ledger that are not in Cash Manager. Well, if we look at this, what does it have? I have checks were cut on 7/16 and they were posted to 12. So 7/16 means they went into Cash Manager because remember my start date was like 1997. But they're not showing up in Cash Manager. They're not in 7/16. So they're not in Cash Manager because the period to post is 12. 7/16 is prior. I probably need to run an integrity check to grab them and bring them into the system because of the date is wrong. I'll bet you that it's not 7/16 though. I'd have to look at those. So you may want to go in and look at this batch and see if we can figure out when they were posted. But you can see there's a bunch of items that are off. But if they're in the general ledger but not in Cash Manager, it could be the same kind of thing where the account was turned on and we haven't run the integrity check, so they're not there yet. It's just you may have to do that in order to bring them into there so that you can actually have them for reconciling. Could be they shouldn't even be there. And do I have a page 2? And here are additional items. So the same kind of thing. I've got those are creation date. So the transaction date, it says they're prior. So you'd have to track all these items down to try to figure out what happened, where'd they come from, and it would take, I said, investigating. And then for every item that is wrong, you could either do O's or journal entries. You have to figure out what is best for your system as to the reconciliation of it. So as I said, this can be very, very helpful in pointing out what could be off. You can also do journal entries to fix it versus the O's. You would just debit and credit cash, but with the different dates, so that if you want to be able to see it in the GL that something happened versus just cash manager, you could say, okay, on 7/16, I want to debit cash, but then on 11/1, I want to credit cash for this check number, blah, blah, blah. The wash in the GL, but it would fix the dates for you. Just another option. Okay, so that's a tool. Another tool for Cash Manager is either you've got the check register, which would show you all checks that have been cut, and it's the same kind of thing during the period. It's going to ask you what period do you want to look for. Excuse me. So these are what checks were cut during the month. Again, you can always run it within accounts payable. The daily cash report is going to be the same as this inquiry. It just gives you the values. So if you didn't want to, if you really wanted to print something out that you could give to somebody, so you could see where you stand on your cash, you could print the daily cash report. Just summary. So just show you where you stand. As I said before, this can be very helpful if you don't always close your periods right away. It will at least allow you to see how much money you have. So this only gave me during, what actually happened during this month. Check deposit and Recon can be very helpful. The biggest thing about it is it will only give you those items that were posted during the dates that you give it. So whereas your bank rec report will show you everything that's outstanding, this one will only show you the items that were processed during that time frame. So if I do a print preview and I pick my 11/1 date for my 1030/01/10, and I say okay, this is going to show me every check and every deposit that occurred during that month. It will show me, where did it come from? So I've got, checks and deposits, the description, the amount, how much cleared, and then as well as what is the status, whether it was cleared or whether it's still outstanding. You could use templates to look for what is my cleared and what is my outstanding. The only thing I don't like is, as I said, the fact that it doesn't give me all outstanding from even previous months. But that may not matter if you have an account that, like I said, payroll, where you may only have a couple items outstanding from the previous month. So it's just, you could even look, you could run it based on clear date, which might be helpful. So I just wanted you to at least see it. You might utilize it for something, for doing your bank recon. Okay. All right, so I think those are kind of reports that would go along with your bank recon. Any questions? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. The next area. All right, under processes. Another feature that they have in the system is the ability to set it up your cash manager to import a listing of cleared items from the bank. And what it will take is a little bit of work. Typically, when a bank, when you get a bank rec or bank statement, when you download it from the website for the bank, it's going to give you the day, a description of some sort, a reference number, whether it was check or not or whatever, and the amount. In this case, I've got the date, the description, a serial number, a reference number, and then the amount. As you can see, my amounts have plus signs and minus signs, but as well, it says over here, okay, well, that's a deposit. I know. So I said, okay, I know that this is how I can get out of their system. You probably have to manipulate it a little bit in order to be able to import it into Cash Manager. And what I mean by that is Cash Manager will record however the entry was entered within Solomon. So a check, of course, will be a check. But like a deposit is going to be like AR. So it's going to be a batch, and it's look for a date, and it's going to look for a dollar amount. So if you have a deposit that's done and the date doesn't match, it may not match it up. Or you do a journal entry like for these American Express, it probably wouldn't match it up. You may not enter it that way. So you have to kind of manipulate it so that the two will meet in the system. And it may take some playing around in order to make it work the way you want. So what I've done here is I've got, this is my base. I'm just going to shrink it a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to open up. Under here, under Setup, is the Setup screen. I'll do F4. Okay. I set up a check clearing screen so that I could bring in a file. You can call it whatever you wanted. I called it ops. Again, what company are you using it for? What GL account number, bank account, and subaccount? What field in your file will indicate whether it's a check or deposit? So based on what we're looking at, I'm saying field number 2, right here, description. Because here I've got deposit and check. So in this column or field, it should indicate what is what, okay? Saying, well, what indicates what is a check? So for me, it's check. Some people, it might be a C or a D. So it really depends on what you get from your bank. What's my deposit indicator? Well, although this says remote DEP, I want to make it just DEP, just make it easier on myself. So I'm probably going to change all of these from remote DEP to just DEP. Okay. Then it says my check deposit field number. What's my check number? So check number is in number 3. Okay. What is the amount field? Well, that's number 5. Then it says assume decimals. That's if for some reason you have whole numbers. Majority of the time people receive it in dollars and cents, so you don't need to worry about checking that. That would just mess up your numbers. What is the clear date? Well, that's number 1 for us. What line do I want to start on? Initially I said 5, but I want 1 because I've updated my file. And when should I stop importing if I have problems? I said 5 because I'd like it to stop importing if it's having too many issues. If I just, something's completely wrong with it. And again, it's a matter of playing. Whenever you do an import into Solomon, it's a matter of getting the layout right before it'll completely work the way you want. Okay, and I've said what will my delimiter be? That means in between each field, what will there be? My final one's going to be a comma delimited file. So I said comma. So if I said save here, I'm going to show you, I'm going to close that. What I ended up doing was that I sliced all of that down, updated it. I modified so that it's just DEP, like I said, and I'm just bringing in the deposits and the checks. I'm not bringing in some of that Amex stuff. Again, until you can tie it exactly to the way it is in your system, you may not want to, you may just want to bring in all the checks just because that's the hardest part. You know, if you have a huge, long list of them. So here's my date, my deposit, you know, and how much money came in. Okay, so I'm just going to, this is what it would look like. So now that I've got the format and I've got a file, I can actually come into here and run an import. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to look for what is the thing, my setup that I ran. And it says, okay, I'm running it to this company for that account, sub-account, it's the same kind of thing. Where's my indicator of my checks and my deposits? So reiterates everything here. So then if it says, okay, where am I going to, what file am I importing? I've actually put this on my desktop. And it is this one, bank import. And then import reference. So this will give it for your, if you need to run it over and over, or let's say you do it throughout the month, you do it once a week or something, you could do like 11V1, you know, so I know it's my first one, or 11-1. So it's the first one I bring in for the month. If I'm doing it, you know, okay, the first of the month, 15th or whatever. But you want them to be unique. If they're not unique, it will overwrite what was already imported. So what I mean by that is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to process this. I don't think it's going to find anything. I'm going to go ahead and do a begin. Oh. Okay, and it said I had a non-numeric number. I think that very first one. Okay, I had an extra comma in there. All right, let's start it again, save. So if I do, let's try one more time. Hopefully it imports it. If it doesn't, I'll show you the screen without it. It's supposed to import. I want bank and 11. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now, if I go into this screen for my 1030-01, what will happen is it brought in everything I had in that file. I'm back here. I had this, oh, all right, it opened more than once. It brought in everything I had in that file, and then if it matched something, if it found a friend that had the exact, that it was a deposit, you know, that the amount was $3,000, that it was on the 8th, it would have said, I matched it and brought it over to, and it would have a matching over on this side. In all these cases, everything I brought in, it really didn't find anything because this was just a sample I had, but it could help you if you have, you know, a lot of checks that you need to clear. And if all you bring is those in, then you can easily bring them in and have them match up. If the check and the dollar, or sorry, the check number and the dollar amount all match, it would match and say, okay. If they matched, what you could also do is, if you say, oh, okay, I can see this check number equals, you know, something you can match, find a match. Once you find them, you would do what's called a commit results, and that would actually write it into your bank recon screen as being cleared. So it's just one less way if you don't want to manually have to clear items by importing versus actually click, click, click. Okay. Just another nicety, and I just thought of something I didn't show you. If you do have a long list of items and you wanted to clear them, I forgot to mention this. I showed where you can drill into what is the item, but you can actually do clearing a range. So if you have, again, you have your check recon, and from check number 1512 through 1560 are all cleared, I could put that here, and it would clear all of them at once as well. It's a nice way of being able to clear items without having to go one by one. Yes, 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 yes. And as I said, the same thing with once you clear them, you can copy paste to make sure you really balance completely back to that bank rec that you have in your hand. Okay. Another thing that you may find is as you're going through the bank rec and you find something, so I'm here and you're like, oh, okay, wait a minute, I just found another thing that I missed. You can easily from here go into those transaction screens, the same ones I've showed you before, and say save. It will open up the screen where I can then do a batch to help correct or add something or whatever, or oops, I forgot this fee, or, oh, I need to correct a dollar amount, it was entered wrong, things like that. And you can easily do that straight from that screen. Once you're posted, you'll have to refresh, but it will update these balances for you. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Well, the last thing I want to show you is I'm just going to kind of go over a few tips and tricks of things that you may run across. I mentioned the date sensitive thing. Some things to consider before you start using Cash Manager. First of all, if you use the AP, which many people do, be sure that your checks are cleared before you start using it. I ran into a situation where somebody had decided they wanted to start using it, and they had years and years and years of checks to be cleared. We can always do it through SQL Server, but it's a lot easier if you could even do like before you turn on Cash Manager, you could clear them with the bank recon within AP, or as with them, I mean, we had to do it like small batches, but we were able to clear them, to try to clear out the thousands and thousands of checks before we could actually start fresh with the brand new year. I also changed their beginning date to be this year versus it was 2007 or something. So that's just something to consider. Also, if you have very complicated bank reconciliations, like you're doing them in the GL, but you have credit cards, emerging deposits, and other things, you may want to look at how you do your bank recon before you try to start tackling this. Because however it's input is how it's going to feed into Cash Manager. And if that doesn't tie to your actual bank statement, it can make it very frustrating to try to balance to your Cash Manager, especially within transits and credit cards where you have lots of moving parts. You can submit a batch, but you don't get paid by the exact same batch, and it can get really hairy. Also, are your people consistent with entering the right date? Or are they, oh, well, I'm posting back to August, but I don't care if it's today because the general ledger doesn't care. But if you start using Cash Manager, it will. So you really want to make sure that people are consistent with their dates. Otherwise, it will really mess you up. And then, but if you have simple ones, if you just do it in Excel right now, it might be worth it, do it easily for you. Okay. Some other things, things that I've run into and fixes on how to fix things. I kind of showed you that if a journal entry was wrong, if you had the wrong date, right period, wrong date. You could either do a journal entry that with the correct date. So again, that would mean, minus the wrong one, positive the right one, or the O types, which I showed you how to do with the ODs, the OMs. And again, just making sure that you reverse, that you use the right reversal. If it was a deposit that was wrong, use an OM on the wrong day and an OD on the right day. So just be careful when you're messing with O's, as I said, because they don't touch the GL. Accounts receivable, and same thing with payables. If you accidentally did a deposit, let's say, twice, and you didn't mean to, you didn't realize you had already posted it. So normally you would want to reverse that. But let's say you didn't find it out till the next month. Accounts receivable will allow you to do an NSF, but it will use your current business day and your current AR period. So in AR, you may already be in the next period. I could fix the business day, but I can't always fix the period. So if you do this, then you'd probably have to do it. You're going to have to do a journal entry to fix the NSF, because it's going to post wrong. It possibly could post the wrong dates. The other way you could do it is a little more complicated, but it would work to your advantage, because then it would just be a no type. But basically, it would be to post a debit memo to cash, which would put the money back on AR and reducing cash. And then you would apply that second payment to that invoice. So AR is cool, GL is cool, but then Cash Manager, you would have to do an OM, because I'm trying to reverse the duplicate on the date that it happened. And so you would they would wash, those two would wash each other out, the duplicate payment and the duplicate, the OM would record to wash with the second deposit. Because Cash Manager does not recognize debit memos, it only recognizes deposits and NSF. Okay, this is where I just talked about the NSFs and the periods. So you just have to be careful when you do this. And with the NSF, and then it said the journal entries, you could do journal entries to reverse to fix the dates. And this was the debit memo that I just discussed. Okay, AP, here's another one. Oh, so you had a check, you posted it, and then the next month you came along and you did a void. So when you're doing your bank recon, you're like, wait a minute, I know I voided that check. Why isn't it showing up? Again, Cash Manager is going to look at the date of the void. So if you went into the void entry screen in Accounts Payable, and I know that, I wanted to post it to 12, but if I really wanted it to void in 11, if the date is not right, it's not going to show up for you, because it looks at the date. So it's going to say that as of 11/30, I was outstanding. I didn't know I was voided until 12/10 when you actually voided me. So you could use those to clear it out, because you didn't really want it outstanding, and you would have to do like an OD, the ODOM thing to kind of wash with what occurred with your void check and the GL. Just little tricks that I've run into throughout the years. And last but not least, I know I've said it probably 1,000 times already, but dates. That's all Cash Manager cares about, and that's all it ever will care about. So if you have those under control, you can handle anything. And sometimes it takes a little time, but once you get it, it can be, Cash Manager can be nice to have. It can be, because it remembers everything that was outstanding from the last period. So you just pull it up and say, oh, okay, this check was still outstanding, versus going into Excel or your GL and try to figure out, what happened. So on that note, I think I've shown you everything in Cash Manager. Please let us know if you have any questions. You can contact Jeannie Mahoney if you want CPE credit. Let us know. And let us know if you have any questions. I am here if you have any support questions. And I hope you have a good day, and I hope you learned a lot. I'm going to be signing off now. All right. Have a good day.